Renée Ricco, independent journalist, reporting live here in Batavia, New York. For those of you who follow my work, know that I have covered tent revival meetings the last few years here in Batavia. Cornerstone Church and Mario Murillo Ministries have partnered together to bring a spiritual awakening to Western New York. Back in June, Mario was here holding tent revival meetings, and he closed his tent meeting a day early in protest for a sinister injustice that occurred here in Batavia years ago that was never properly dealt with and is still being covered up today. I will be speaking with Pastor Paul Doyle regarding a disturbing story that broke in the Warburg Watch on Friday. You can see the link below for the story. Is this the reason a spiritual awakening has been blocked for Western New York? Let's go to Pastor Paul for comment. So, Pastor Paul, you issued a statement to your congregation yesterday in response to a disturbing story that was broke in the Warburg Watch on Friday about the sexual abuse of a 12-year-old girl by a pastor here in Batavia, similar to the Robert Morris, Cindy Clemshire story in Texas. Can you comment on this and bring our viewers up to speed on the story?
Yeah, this is something that certain people in our church have known about for years. This was something that caused us outrage back when it happened, and the story basically is that it was squelched, it was squashed. The story that we were to let bygones be bygones, and there was no outrage over what had happened. And I know Melissa personally. She's very close. She's still very close to me. And she's moved on. She's in Colorado. And of course, our statement as a church is visible on our website, as well as I spoke to my congregation, which is also on our Facebook page, if anybody has any questions. But this is the first time I have ever seen outrage over what happened come externally. It came internally when we discovered it had happened. Pastor Marty was long gone when we learned about it. So nobody in our church could hold him accountable. He has his own ministry. He has his own overseers. He was already well established in the Western New York church community. But we didn't see the outrage there. And I personally never saw it. And it's like they just wanted this to go away. And it was Mario, when he discovered it, he's the one that began the outrage. And you could hear that on the last night of the tent meetings, when God told him to fold up his tent, leave the area until this was dealt with.
Okay, and as you know, Paul, I come from the financial world, and in my business, there's something called fiduciary responsibility. A fiduciary means faith or trust. It is a high call and obligation to act in the best interest of a person or persons. A fiduciary is expected and required to always act ethically and to be held to high standards of service. A pastor and their overseers assume such a role with moral authority. How is it possible that this situation was never dealt with and covered up by the overseers to this day and the elders, and that this individual is still allowed to practice in the pulpit?
Yeah, that's a question that I don't know if I can answer. There certainly is. I'm a new pastor myself. I came from the business world. And in the business world, you could have a corporate office. I was a independent businessman. And so I really had nobody overseeing me. But when I became a pastor, I wanted it. And so I established some mechanisms internally where my elders can literally vote me out if they see something that I'm doing. I wanted that. I didn't have to do it. I wanted it. And I've also lined myself up with Mario Murillo. I wanted somebody who I believed in, who I respected, to have an apostolic oversight of me personally. And I have submitted myself to him. So any church out there, that's typically people's question is, who do you report to? Who's your presbyter? Who's the oversight? And I have to assume that when Pastor Marty ventured out on his own, he had overseers over his ministry. So when this came about, not only was he not dealt with, it was almost covered up. There was a proverbial sweeping under the rug of the issue. And as the outrage continued within our church, it began to turn back on us that we weren't forgiving, that we needed to let bygones be bygones. So the thing that they would talk about my pastor is that he had a forgiveness problem. And this came from higher ups in the Western New York, I guess church oversight levels. And so we basically felt like we had to tuck tail it and run. And the longer this went on, the more and more influence I saw Pastor Marty MacDonald have in this region. And so I suppose it's human nature. I think there's a lot of innocent people in these networks of churches that, first of all, would find it hard to believe. And I think a Christian's natural tendency is to forgive. But that can't be in lieu of taking responsibility, because the Bible is very clear on how this needed to be dealt with. And in Paul's letters to the church, he says this man has to be removed from that capacity because he obviously has a problem. And by putting him in that position where young women, young girls are vulnerable, he has no business being in that capacity.
So Mario, in his statement, had mentioned something about a boys' club, in his word, when he packed up his tent. So me, as a female, says, well, this is a 12-year-old girl. It went on for 6 years. Is she the only one? If there's some other women out there, please come forward. It's important. But it sounds to me like a 12-year-old girl was somewhat sacrificed on the altar of building personal fiefdoms. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you put it exactly right. That's exactly what happened. And their ministries, their reputations, in their eyes, I can only speculate, became bigger than the life of this girl. And of course, when it came to light, Melissa was now a mother herself. She was a mother of 4. Mm-hmm. When it happened, she was 12 years old. All throughout her teens, this occurred. And so I don't know if how she was looked at, how she was perceived. But the right thing to do would have been to deal with this, for Pastor Marty to take responsibility. That was our beef as a church. That was my pastor's. He just was stunned that no reputable clergy member of any significance would speak out against this. Mm-hmm. If anything, they turned it against him, and I watched it. I was not in leadership when this happened. I was a businessman. My pastor became a friend of mine, but I watched this happen, and I was there when Marty was confronted by my pastor as well. He asked me to come with him, where he confronted Pastor Marty about molesting his daughter. But as far as what Mario, I guess, coined the phrase cover up, why this happens, how it continues to happen, it's still a mystery to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that the secular world is more shocked than the Christian realm, and yet we're supposed to hold to a higher standard of morality, which is very, very confusing. Mm-hmm. And it's not healthy for the church either.
No. It actually puts it in a very challenging light.
Yes.
So when you were saying that Melissa's father, the pastor, confronted this individual.
Oh yeah, I was there.
Okay.
His wife was with him, and so there's no doubt in my mind. I know Melissa personally. I've been in communication with her throughout this, and I'm just hoping and believing that this is going to bring healing to her family, because this is an issue, in her own words, she's never been allowed to talk about. And she's gone through a tremendous level of healing in herself. You know that. You've met with her. It's amazing how God has helped her. But the issue's still there.
Right.
And so the progression has been, this started with a 12-year-old girl, an attack on a 12-year-old girl that went on for years.
Right.
And when it was disclosed, it then began to destroy her family. Her family. And I personally believe that it led to the death of her mother. Her mother was so devastated. We watched her, and her health declined. They were so saddened by this, and they were so tormented by the way it turned back on them, that they were the problem, that they were the unforgiving ministry, that it was Melissa's fault. It was Melissa that seduced this man. All this stuff. I heard all of this stuff. Can't we just move on? And yet here's the matriarch, the mother, that watches her daughter get tormented. And only a mother knows what that would have done. And so it literally destroys the family, and then it destroys the ministry. We were a ministry that was 350 strong, and we got down to 12 people when we saw this. And so, and then enter Mario. He relights the fire. What's interestingly, through this ministry, not for us, but for the region. This has never been about us. Mario, it's not about Cornerstone Church. It's about Western New York, a revival, a prophetic declaration of revival over this. And I begin to connect the dots myself, and I saw the progression. Starts with a 12-year-old girl, hits a minister's family that's got a heart for revival. If you would have known him, that's where the tent came from. He had a tent when a tent wasn't popular. He was bringing it all over Western New York. So there was revival in there. And so then the ministry is attacked, and then it leads to this web of cover-up, web of deception, that if you heard Mario has grieved the Holy Spirit. He wants to move in this area. But really, if you even look at the Bible, many times God will deal with his people first before he brings revival. And I believe the Bible says that judgment comes first to the house of the Lord. So, I can't say I have full understanding on, only God knows what he's doing, why it took this long. But I believe we're in a day and age where people are starting to wake up like, this should not be tolerated anymore. And so like I said, it's the first time. We've known about this for a long time. And it's the first time I've seen outrage. And thank God it came from somebody with the integrity of Mario Murillo.
Well, reading Dee's blog, she, again, she covers these kind of things that go on in the church realm. And she said that often an individual grooms families, churches, the community. So it makes it almost airtight that some 12-year-old little girl, why should we believe her? Oh, that couldn't have happened, or whatever the case may be. It's just interesting to read the people that she's interviewed and what she's covered about this, because it's enlightening to myself and certainly I'm sure many people who've read it. So now, Paul, what is your opinion? What should happen next now that the story's out?
Well, I'm just going to go along with what Mario Murillo saw, and that is he announced that this was going to be dealt with 3 months ago, and he exhorted Pastor Marty. He didn't use Pastor Marty's name at the time. He says, I implore you to deal with this now before the media finds out, because if you don't, this is going to explode and there will be a scandal. God doesn't want it. And so it's been 3 months now, and I haven't heard anything. And again, some of the small feedback that I've got is that, oh, this happened 25, 30 years ago. Can't we still let bygones be bygones? That's the mood that I hear. I don't understand it. I also read what D. Parsons wrote in an article about how it not only is it the grooming of a young girl, but it's the grooming of a community. I never looked at it that way, but that makes total sense.
Right.
What should be done? You know what? It's out of my hands. And I'm going to let God deal with it the way he deals with it. If he uses the media, But it feels like it's going to be harsh the way it's dealt with. And so we want to be there to help people. But that's why I wanted to be transparent to my congregation. I knew about it. I knew the story has now been broken. I didn't want to be in a reactive mode. I wanted to be in a proactive. I wanted my congregation to be aware of it, and what our stance was, with no questions. And I'll be happy to answer questions, because there's nothing to hide on our end. We try to expose this for what it was, and nobody wanted to hear. And I think, when the media comes, I'm probably going to ask them, where were you 25 years ago? Because a lot of them said, they started using, statute of limitations, there's nothing you can do. That's what we would hear. And so now even more time has passed, and yet it's still a thing. It's still something that seems to me, the way this came about, God has never forgotten. And he's a graceful God. He allows people to come and repent. But then there comes a day to where if it just isn't happening, he's going to intervene. And that's what this feels like to me.
Well, it almost sounds like the same narrative that was used 25 years ago, and the same gaslighting techniques. Turn it back on the victim, turn it back on the family, have everybody buy that line, and then make it go away. And I would wonder, and I think maybe we would all wonder after reading Dee's blog, if Melissa wasn't the only girl that this happened to. We don't know, but if it was, if she was not the only girl, it would be good for the other women to come out. So this can be dealt with and stopped. So as you and Mario have stated, that this egregious situation has held back revival in Western New York. Do you think now, with the story being out, that a true awakening can come to this region?
I will never give up. I will never, God knows what he's doing, and he can look for man to cooperate, but I will never back off of wanting to see a revival in Western New York. Because I look around our nation, I look around this region, our state, our culture, and if we don't have a move of God, then we're in trouble. We're already in trouble. And it takes the people of God to cry out. And you cannot just cry out to God with lip service, because you can't demand that the culture clean up its act when we ourselves haven't cleaned up our act. And so I'm sure God wants to hear our cries, but he's got to hear it from clean hearts, clean minds, and clean hands. And that's what I think this is about.
Well, Pastor Paul, thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for updates on this unfolding story.